do for the constituents and residents of the 18th Congressional District?
Well, we do know, according to the Kinder report, that more than 55% of people in our district can't afford $750 medical. So we know that wiping out medical debt, while that might be a national policy, it has a real impact on everyday lives that are here. Because if people are here that cannot afford the healthcare. One of the other things I want to focus on is what I call the Government Modernization Act of 2025. It's what I want to use to support and go and help places like the tax office get access to new equipment and computers. I was talking to Annette Ramirez not so long ago and talking about how she didn't have enough of a budget to go forward and really modernize and get new computers for her office, something that directly affects everybody. So I'll be working to bring federal funds for that, also with our permitting center, also working to make sure that we can work with the community partners. I want to rebuild the Acresome Multi-Service Center as well. I think it's long overdue, it's time to get that done. So, I mean, these might be national policies, but if a senior can get more dollars in their account every month for Social Security, that impacts their lives. If somebody's sitting there with $100,000 in medical debt because they got a heart attack that they didn't plan for, that affects their lives. And if somebody over here sees a big flood that happened that goes and erases family memories that they've had in a long time and destroys the family home, and we can bring the ones that put the federal dollars here to go and stop that from reaching their home, that impacts their lives. So Washington, D.C. might be a long way away, and it might be a federal policy, but it's real impact on all of our lives. And I look forward to bringing that forward.
One last thing under that category, I forget your name, but the sister here brought up the Bethune Empowerment Center, right? That's an example of something local to the district. So you mentioned Acres Home Community Center. What would you do, say, in Third Ward? What would you do in the part of the district that is a part of like the Washington corridor? What would you do in City Gas, right? Do you have that type of vision where you're looking at specific things dedicated to various parts of the district? Or is it just more so a funnel down or trickle down investment?
Well, one of the things I'll talk about is like particularly the cancer clusters, right? I think that's a really big issue that we have. And I think that ultimately we've talked about it for a long time, but I think that we need to be talking about creating not only national policy, but ways to go forward and help people there. So I want to be able to go forward and guarantee free healthcare for everybody that's been affected by that. They don't have to pay those things. I want to make sure that they have full relocation costs as well. And I think there's a lot of people in Congress that would be able to resonate with this. Like, for example, Cancer Alley in Louisiana. People like Congressman Troy Carter, people like Congressman Cleo Field. They have big portions of their districts in which people are going through a lot of what we're focused with, as well in the cancer clusters that we have. So I'll be working to make sure that we can not only remedy the situation, then also make sure that there is a plan to make sure people are compensated for the real issues that they've had. So cancer clusters are one thing, multi-service center is another. But like I said, for everybody in this country, I think more dollars for Social Security, wiping out medical debt is some of the most important things that we can do to help people in their lives.
Absolutely, thank you. My next question, go ahead.
So
I'm going to let you know.
one of the things also, you talking on national, and what one of the things I heard. This sister say was, when you're talking with individuals, in Acres Home area, there's something that North Houston or Acres Home, there's a certain particular issue that we can coalesce around and get that done. Third Ward, there's an issue, there's 5 or 6 different pockets or individual projects that you could look at and address and have that specifically to discuss at that particular community, but on that community level, but also tie it into the national level also.
I'll give you a good example of that. Same thing with Pleasantville. Pleasantville, Penn Park area. I mean, they talk a lot about a lot of the pollution that's been leaking into their water and stuff like that. So I'll be focused a lot on making sure because you know what they do with the air monitors, they put them far away and it ultimately doesn't actually read where it really is. So that needs to have a member of Congress as we focus on getting them in the right place and making sure that those things can come forward correctly. So it's those things, making sure that it's cleaned up, and then making sure that the dollars that is coming from Washington are affecting the things that care about.
Area specific, that's what we're saying.
Correct.
My next question is about investment.
Okay.
All right. And I think you answered this earlier, but I want to be more specific. So do you live in Congressional District 18? You know, it's not a legal requirement to live in a district that you seek to represent. You just need to live in that state. Do you live in the district? And if so, in which neighborhood? That's the first part.
I do live in the district, I live downtown.
And then the other part of that is, what are you doing currently in your neighborhood itself as a leader seeking to be our next congressional member?
One of the biggest things that I spend a lot of time doing is informing people about what's going on. So we do a lot of work to communicate about, not only just elections, but also what's happening in Washington. Did a roundtable, talk to a lot of folks about particularly that were concerned about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those types of situations, whether or not they were still going to be accessible to be there. We've gone on listening tours throughout the entire district to make sure that that's possible. And then again, some of the work that we've already done is to help people with sexual assault reform, helping people, for example, with voting reform and all of that stuff. So, I've done a lot of work on these things, but, right now, currently, going around listening to people and making sure that we have good plans for the moment that we're getting on.
Next question is about tenure,
Okay.
right? What type of tenure do you plan to have as our next US representative for Congressional District 18?
What do you mean by that?
Kind of tenure. We asked, Mayor Turner this when he ran in the last summer, right? That was a question I asked of him about what type of tenure would he have? How long do you plan to serve?
How long you plan to be around?
Congress?
Yeah.
Are you trying to be a lifetime member in the House of Representatives? Are you looking at 20 solid years, 15 solid years? And the reason why I ask is, in this district, we've lost two people.
Yeah.
Right? Who have dedicated their lives to public service. Public service is very hard, but
Yeah.
no form of public service is harder than being a member of the House of Representatives.
Correct.
Senate is much easier on
Correct.
the body.
Right.
But you're constantly gonna be running for office and expectedly serving the district.
Right.
So what is your tenure? What does your tenure look like? What does that outlook look like?
And
for
Isaiah,
us?
before you answer, can you take a scoop back? Cause I did go. So you can see your beautiful face. Yeah.
I can't put a thing on how many years I plan to serve or all of those things. I will say this, I don't plan on dying there. I don't plan on being there for 50 years per se. But what I will say is, I want to make sure that I'm always accountable. And the way to do that is to change, I believe, the process. So I'll be filing legislation, one, to put spending limits on congressional elections. So people can't just go get these big massive campaign accounts and scare anybody away from running against them. I want to mandate debates in all congressional elections, make sure that nobody can just hide in the seat. So that if y'all want to go and ask me questions.
Yep.
You can make sure that I can go forward and answer them.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that we're banning outside money. And so that people can actually fund elections themselves.
Mhm.
And I think that when you do these type of things, you are very accountable to the people.
Yeah.
And if the people don't think that I'm doing a good job, they can get me out. Because I think that what's happening a lot of times is that sometimes in other areas, not necessarily here, but in other areas, people will get in these seats and then that's it.
It's a
They
career
will,
move.
they'll go get a
Yeah.
career move. They will literally go forward and sit there and there's no way to get them out because they've got big campaign accounts and that's just how it is. So
Can I answer your question? So I'm glad you asked that question because we do, not just we, melanated folks, but people make careers out of being politicians. And that's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it often is because people, they get more concerned with that position and seat than the people.
that's right.
So given the fact that you're not planning to die there, if you know that you are there to do a certain thing, and you're there to make sure that the situation whenever you leave is better than it was when you arrived. Have you thought about, or do you have a succession plan to say that, okay, well, I'm only going to be here for 1, 2, 3 terms, and I'm going to be training somebody to take my place because it has to be about creating a pipeline of leadership and not just one person.
That's not really something I've actively thought about.
Okay, well, maybe it should
Because,
be.
well, I mean, I think, in my situation, look, I'm not gonna make a commitment in terms of like how long I plan to serve and
Sure.
those things, because
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, it could be that maybe I plan to serve and I do a bad job, people say, get them out of there, right? So, you know, that's up to the people as to how long they want me to serve. Because I don't believe in this thing to where a person gets a seat and it's, at the end of the day, it's the people that make that decision. So if I get reelected, it's because the people will want me to be there.
Okay.
And so, like I said, that's why I want to be doing a lot of work to make sure that we're making it possible for, you know, people to always be held accountable, like debates, like not being able to go and raise $10 million in a campaign account to say, look, anybody that tries to run against me, I got 10 million against you. So look, it's putting those spending limits, working and advocating for those reforms, I think will do a lot to make sure that people are always accountable. And yes, I'm always gonna be there and be around.
So having said all of that, you still can't give us a ballpark figure.
No,
And how old are you?
26.
26. So
26.
Wow. You a baby.
do you foresee 30 years there?
I can't,
It's 27.
I can't speak to any ballpark estimate.
To ask him?
No, I-
And I think it's a reasonable question.
I agree.
And I'm glad that you asked it, but you know, like I said, I want to give you a straight answer. And the straight
You
answer,
gave your answer, and that's fine, but I just wanted to dig a little bit further. Alright, so this question is about honesty,
okay,
alright? Who or which 3 of your fellow Congressional District 18 candidates do you see as viable candidates?
Good question.
I mean, I don't really think about my opponents, if I'm just being honest with you. I mean, I mean, I get it, but I don't really think about them that much, if I'm being honest with you. They might think about me, but I don't really think about them. So, I mean, there's a bunch of people in the race, so
There are, and you served on panels and forums with them, you recognize some of them as elected officials in the city or formerly elected, you know, some of them work in the community. Some are business owners, some are formerly elected, I said that already, so you know who they are. But is it just that you don't want to speak to the question, or have you? Or because whoever wins is going to be your congressional representative, whether it's you or one of the plethora of the many, right? So are you just in refusal to answer that because you don't foresee them being viable? Is that what you're?
no, I mean,
saying, or you just don't think of them?
that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, you know, I think other people can campaign for themselves, you know what I mean? So that's on them to go and tell people what they want to do and if they're viable or not. I mean, that's up to them. I'm just, you know,
Alright, 2 more questions. The next one is about current projects. What substantive work are you currently doing or advocating for in CV 18? If you could give us 2 to 3 examples.
so one of the things I'm currently advocating for is, for example, free healthcare for everybody that got affected by the cancer clusters. So I'm actively working about that. I've been talking a lot about that. You know, I've talked to folks like Troy Carter before about the fact that the cancer clusters are something that's really big in his area. So I'll be working a lot on that. The second I get to Congress, and something that I'm actually actively pushing for. And then the other thing, again, we have a lot of seniors that live in the district, a lot of them, and we have to protect Social Security. That's gonna be a big thing when this is, whenever we get there. If there's gonna be- Huh?
Currently
The
working.
question was about what you're currently doing in the
So-
community.
So I'm actively working to make sure that we can fight for these cancer clusters to get treatment for that. I'm actively working every single day to make sure that we can create a side hustle fund.
So what are you actually doing toward that? I'm not trying to.
Oh, you're fine.
I mean, you know, one of the things that I'm a candidate for Congress. And so I'm running to be a candidate. So all my time right now is spent towards talking to voters in the district and communicating with them about figuring out what they want and then taking that on to DC.
Okay.
That's what my,
Yeah.
okay,
Since you're, and that's respected, right? Because you're in the scope of being a candidate current.
yes,
So 10 months ago, you weren't a candidate.
okay,
August 2024
okay,
through, I guess, December 2024.
correct.
What were you doing substantively? What work were you doing in the community or advocating for in Congressional District 18?
Well, I'll tell you what I was doing with my time. For one, I was working to flip the United States House of Representatives. So I was actually spending a lot of time traveling around to flip seats. Now, it might sound like that's like the national thing that's away from things, but right now, we just saw the big ugly bill only passed by one vote. We see a lot of these policies passing by one vote.
Yes.
And because of the races that I worked to campaign on, like, for example, Tom Suozzi in New York, like Shamari Figures in Alabama, like Janelle Bynum in Washington, in Oregon. You know, I've traveled a lot to make sure that we can win these big races. Same thing with Angela Alsobrook. So having those races there and working to elect those people, I think is in the future going to be what's very important to stop a lot of the crazy stuff that's happening right now. So what I spent the majority of my time after Congresswoman Jackson Lee unfortunately passed away was traveling around to elect Democrats to make sure that we can go forward and win this. But then also staying forward, I worked, for example, to help Mayor Turner when he was running to go and help turn out the vote. We did some block walks for him, working to do some community stuff like that. So a lot of political work is what I was focused on with that election to elect Kamala Harris and other people. Unfortunately, Kamala Harris didn't get elected. But those other members of Congress did, and that's a real impact that's actually made a big difference.
Can I interject something? So I asked you this earlier, but I think we got away from what you're talking about your work on the college campus, which is the second part of my question. The first one is, what can be done, if anything, to put HISD back into the hands of the community via this TEA, this government takeover, state takeover, federal government takeover, we talked about this sexual predator issue that we're dealing with right now. I would love for you to share with people what you did on those college campuses and how you can bring that to Houston, because I think that's an excellent idea that needs to be implemented. So the takeover and helping with sexual predation on our high school campuses.
So it's filing legislation to make sure that we can stop, for example, the vouchers. Second of all, stop governors from being able to remove elected officials, which is effectively how the HIC takeover was able to happen.
Okay.
So those two things is one of the first priorities that when we win the White House in 2028, which I'm fully expecting, and we win Congress, we're going to make sure that we can go forward and do those things there. I think that can exactly.
And both those things involve you getting the votes to do that.
Correct.
Okay.
But in the meantime, it's also making sure that when we go forward and we win the we expect to win the House in 2026.
Okay.
So making sure that the committees, like the Education Committee, can talk about these issues and investigate some of the oversight that's necessary there. So I think that's one of the things that we can immediately focus on and getting done.
Okay.
In terms of you know, the sexual assault stuff,
Yeah.
we're working to create like the full support partnership nationwide. So make sure that funds are available for these.
What is the full support partnership?
That's what we did.
Well, explain that.
So it was free legal support, free, you know, sexual examinations for students, a hotline for students, making sure that there was support groups to support survivors, as well as a full tour at orientations at a lot of these schools.
Okay.
So they knew, you know, what was going on and what was expected.
Okay.
So making sure that that's available, and then taking that model, taking it nationwide, and making sure that it's not just at our colleges, but also at our high schools and places of work to make sure that people can actually know what's going on in this room.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Next question, and hopefully final. It's about being equipped.
Okay.
What is your currency profession?
My current profession.
Your currency profession.
So before I was running for Congress, I was a project manager in the aerospace world, particularly project procurement. So in which our company was responsible for winning billions of dollars worth of contracts for companies, some in Houston, some not. And so I have a lot of experience on the private sector side in working to understand how federal contracts work, how they're given out. And it is through that experience that I know for us and a lot of our contracts, we're not able to get them.
Yeah.
Very hard for our businesses to do business with the government.
Yeah.
So it's figuring that stuff out in the same way that Alaska Natives and others have been able to figure out stuff for them and how they get special contract language. I think we should be talking about that. But yeah, so it's doing that work there. That was my job. But now that I'm running for Congress, I resigned, well, I'm technically on leave for my position at work.
Okay. So you worked in some of the industry?
Aerospace and defense.
Oh, the aerospace and defense industry. And what you bring from that to this candidacy is understanding federal contract.
Correct.
Are there any other skills or abilities that you bring? I know I don't want to say moonlight, but you have experience in political strategizing. You kind of have hit on some of that, but what other skills and abilities can we as constituents and residents look to from you that you would bring from your experience. But I want, recognizing you're 26, I know that for some people, that's gonna be a problem. So I want this to be an opportunity for you to talk about, at 26, these are the skills and the knowledge that I have.
Yeah, so in my age, I can tell you, like I said, being able to work my way up, you know, to be Congresswoman Jackson Lee's senior advisor, I think was very important to get the skills necessary there. One of the other things I will also say is about having, you know, the ability to lead teams to get things done, like sexual assault, like on, you know, the voting access thing as well. But the other thing that I bring is being able to get a lot of attention on the things that we do. For example, we have 1 million followers across all platforms. That's very important. And it'll be important to be able to inform people about what's going on in government. I think it's be very important for us to be able to win elections in the future. Because campaigns are no longer just about being on the news or being in the newspaper or just knocking on doors. We got to do all of those things, but we also have to be very aggressive on social media.
That's right.
Republicans dominated that in this last election. They did it relentlessly and it worked. So the reality is that we've got to be able to, one, tailor our message on these platforms, go everywhere we can go. I'll be going on podcasts. I was just on Miss Trina Lowry's podcast not so long ago. I think 2 days ago. She has a podcast for Acres Home. So I'll be working to do and communicate that with everybody. People know I have the skills to do that. Nightly TikTok town hall. Nobody even comes close to the viewership that we've been able to get. 15,000.
You said nightly TikTok?
Nightly TikTok town.
Okay.
Every single night at around 11 o'clock.
Is that primarily where you're seeing the uptick in your donors? Is it coming through your social media?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things about me is that, you know, I'm not accountable to any of the big donor folks per se. I don't need to. Yeah, exactly. We have thousands of donors giving an average of about $20 for our campaign. And what we have is that we've been able to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars from people giving in what they can to be able to support our campaign. I don't need the big folks to write me $3,500 checks, because for me, what's more important is that grandma that's sitting in Acres Home that gives me $35 that says, you know what, I gave a little bit off my social security check because I believe in you. And that's what's funding my campaign. And I'm really excited about it.
Can I interject something?
Yeah, that's
You are 26.
Yeah.
And you said you rose to become a senior advisor.
Mhm.
How long did that rising take, and what does a senior advisor do? Because I think the fact that you are for a few months, you are young, which is a good thing, actually. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And for you to have risen, I'm glad you said that, because that means you went through the ranks to become the senior advisor for a congressperson that a lot of people love and revere. So I think it's important, as relates to the sister's question, you do have experience.
Yeah.
You just happen to be young with that experience.
That's right.
So tell us what you did to rise through the ranks to get to that senior level, and what does a senior level advisor do? Because of course that can aid you as well moving forward.
Well, what I will say is that, you know, I started out carrying a purse. The whole reason why I met Congresswoman Jackson Lee was because, you know, we were doing our voting initiative at the University of Houston, and she came to do a press conference, and she said, Isaiah, here's my number. If you ever need anything, call me. And I don't think she actually expected me to call her, but I did. And I called her asking about how I could help. And so she would send me different events all the time and say, Isaiah, this is what's going on. And I started off, like I said, carrying a purse around.
Yeah.
And I was available every weekend. Didn't go anywhere for a very long time. Probably like maybe 2 years every weekend. My friends would be going out of town, and I would just be saying, okay, let me just do this. I went to all the events that you could imagine, and then she began to trust me.
Was your major in politics or something? What was your
Political
major?
science.
Okay. Okay, so it was up your alley.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Well, I mean, I worked in aerospace at the time, but you know, at the same time, she relied on me to any other spare time I had, I was working with her.
Okay.
And you know, that's how, you know, I got started with that. Then she started to incorporate me into some of the policy issues that she had, and had me doing a lot of research for her. She would always be calling me, you know, those famous 3 o'clock in the morning phone calls.
Yeah.
That some of us, I'm sure, have gotten over the years, you know, is what she would do for me. I would help her on foreign policy issues. I would help her here as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we worked on, that she worked with me to do. But the Congresswoman, I think it's the greatest to ever do it in my own personal capacity. That's what my vision is. And I think that she will always be that GOAT, as I call her, for us. And so, yes, I'm going to be working to actively continue that legacy, but also understanding one of the main lessons that the Congresswoman taught me was always being able to adapt. I think what made her such a good representative is that she never just stayed the way she was back in 1995 when she got elected. She always found new ways, whether that was on social media, whether that was through communicating to people, whether that was being adapted. She was always able to adapt. And that's what I know is important to need right now.
Yeah.
So I'm not running to say I'm going to just be what Congresswoman Jackson Lee did back in 2024 and 2022 and all of those things that was there, because that's not what Congresswoman Jackson Lee would do. She would look at the time of what's going on today, adapt for today's issues, and being able to plan accordingly for that.
Okay.
So that's what I look forward to doing.
So, and so what are the top 3 things that a senior advisor for a congresswoman does, or a congressperson does?
Well, for me, I was just a Swiss Army knife.
Okay.
So whether that was helping her on social media with all of those things, whether that was helping her staff figure out what's the best way to communicate, a mailer per se, whether that was a country in foreign conflict that she needed to figure out, how she should vote on certain things, advising her, being someone that she could go and call and say, Isaiah, what's the situation? And then also being available every weekend. So I went to events every weekend with her, to be able to go forward and to help her on those things. Also helping her on the political side, also being available for her staff in DC,
Okay.
in Washington. So it was a big.
Is her family behind you? Are they backing you and supporting you?
No, some of them are not.
Thank you for the honesty.
Yeah, no, some of them are not, but I mean, that's their own prerogative, but, the relationship I have with the Congresswoman and those very closest to her is very evident. It's very close.
One thing that you pointed out, it wasn't in my original questions, but it was in one of your remarks to one of my questions, was about community college tuition. So when we look at promise programs, as they're generally called, do you have, I guess, any relationship with various chancellors or presidents / CEOs of community colleges here in the Houston area? And have you worked with them in any capacity to help solidify promise program?
So ideally, what I'm talking about is more of the lens of federal funds being available in DC, in the form of a grant program doled out by the DOE to go forward to these college campuses to go forward and do this on their own. So it's not really more of a endowment type program or like a nonprofit type program or like a program that
Dedicated federal funds.
Yeah, it's dedicated federal funds, exactly. That's what I think.
Because several states have already adopted promise programs, and this is something dear to my heart.
Yeah.
I was raised by a professor at a community college.
Right.
I am now a professor at a community college.
Perfect.
And I understand the impact that tuition free has on my students.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why I'm asking this question.
Are those federal funds by any chance being affected by Trump's cutting? Like you mentioned the DOE,
Well,
there's a lot of cutbacks. So is there any federal
So,
cutbacks that affecting it?
Many, in our position, it comes from state and federal funds, but it also comes from private.
correct.
Oh, okay,
So,
okay.
Endowment programs.
Right, right.
yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Because that's how they were, for example, at UT, that's how they did it. They did it through their endowment, right? So they did it for, say, I think if students came from families making less than $150,000 a year, they would have tuition-free college.
Right.
Now, I think that eventually ended up getting struck down because Abbott made a big fuss about it. But that's why I'm more focused on a direct grant program that's from the federal government that they can go forward and fund this season.
The Texas legislature has supported these programs being in these community colleges.
Do they still support them being in the community college?
Yeah, some of the most concerned people in the legislative body, I mean, they support these schools. And I haven't read anywhere where they're like, not wanting to be supportive of that.
Well, that was one of the main reasons why Jay Hartzell was let out of UT. Was because he supported this and apparently he didn't check in before he did it, which was this effectively $150,000 program for people making less than $150K. So and the
But
reason,
that's UT and we're talking about.
Right,
colleges.
right. But what I'm saying is that I was making that remark in terms of like programs as a whole. And what I'm more focused on is making sure that federal grants are available to fund that.
So I heard you mention earlier, I think I did, correct me if I'm wrong, but you talked about pushing back overturning the voucher program.
Yeah.
So explain to us, because a lot of people don't fully understand what the the voucher thing is all about, but let us know why you are against them and what your plan is to roll that back, if you will.
Well, it defunds public schools. Okay,
Okay.
it sends our tax dollars to schools, private schools with Range Rovers in the parking lot. I don't really think that that's really, a good use of our dollars. So in actuality, I look forward to filing legislation that stops states from going out and sending public dollars to private institutions in forms of private schools as they are, with a voucher scheme, in the form of vouchers.
Okay, cool. Ms. Renetta mentioned something earlier that I also had some experience in because I go to super neighborhood meetings. And it's a very important thing. Like you said, when you were on the bus tour with her, you noticed that there were no sidewalks. And then you ask yourself, why are there no sidewalks? Sidewalks, big deal. People may not think it's a big deal because they have sidewalks, but it's a big deal. Having parks where the kids can play, big deal. Getting trash picked up, illegal dumping, all these things
That's a big
happen.
thing we saw in the.
It's a huge thing, especially in the Sunnyside South Park area. So these things that other communities have, get, take for granted or whatever, poor communities don't have these. So can you speak to what you can do now to start moving towards some successes in those arenas, and what you think you can do, what you know you can do when you get to Congress as a congressperson from the district?
In regards to things like illegal dumping and all of those things, the biggest issue that we have is that, allegedly, there's no money for these things.
It is alleged.
Alleged.
Yes, sir.
Alleged.
Yeah,
It's amazing how we have money for all these other things, but they think that you have to be rich to be clean.
Sure.
And I think that's crazy.
Right.
So I will 100% be using my voice to talk about those things.
Yeah.
But then it's also saying, look, the federal government has a really big opportunity to plug a lot of holes in the budget deficit that the city has. But the question is say, okay, if we go forward and get these funds, what is the city going to do to make sure that people
Right.
are not having to live with this? Because it's unacceptable. You drive around Acres Home and you go to a corner store or even just on the street and you see all these people with dumpings that's taller than me.
Yeah.
And I'm 6'4",
Yeah.
tall guy.
Yeah.
Right? So to see that happening to me is absurd. And so we've got to be acting up very, very strong to talk about why these things are happening. Because I guarantee you, go to River Oaks and you try to dump that there, you're not gonna see that.
Yeah.
So just making sure that, like I said, these funds are gonna be available to do this.
So do you have any current relationships with city council persons, at-large persons right now that you can possibly start to foster some solutions? I mean, is that possible?
Well, sure, but the problem is that because I've talked to them about a lot of these things.
Oh, you have?
But I mean, look, our council members, a lot of them, not the Republicans, but a lot of them are great people.
Sure.
And they work hard, and they are constrained by some of the objectives of the current mayor, who has said that there's no money for certain things,
Sure.
and there's money for other things.
That's
So,
right.
I think they're limited in a lot of degrees as to what they can do too. I
Okay.
think we got to look at the reality of the situation.
Okay.
So, yeah, like I said, I'll be working really hard when I get there to use any kind of leverage I can to make sure that, look, people that live, in Acres Home and Independence Heights deserve the same level of service
That's right.
as they get in Clear Lake and Kingwood and everywhere else.
Right. Okay. I have one last question. Anybody else got a question?
To that same point about city council, looking at Harris County Commissioner's Court, right? You got 5 people there. Do you have those relationships to help facilitate some of those needs? I mean, that's part of the role of County Commissioner's Court, to use the roads.
Yeah.
Support
Amen.
the roads. and
Amen.
bridges.
Yeah.
That's right.
So,
Look,
relationships there, have you been? I'm a person that doesn't really have to be elected to be effective. Right, and so that's why I keep saying about the substantive things that you're doing, because I sit on mine, right? But there are certain conversations that can be had, there are studies that can be pulled and showed and get the data. Because what I do know about elected people, or anybody who's in charge, they like when you make them look good.
Sure.
So if I bring you a package ready to go, and it's gonna make you look good, you're gonna implement. So do you have any relationships where you can bring that package now, even while being a candidate, because you wanna serve, you serve.
Shovel ready, shovel ready. Yes. That's what you were saying.
To bring to the county commissioners court or to city hall.
So I know all of the county commissioners, all the county commissioners know me, we have great relationships.
Mhm.
And like I said, as I've spoken to all of them, I look forward to working with all of them the moment that happens, but then also, like I said, bringing concerns in the interim, and to go talk to them as we can, so.
Well, I just, well, thank you for sharing the information, thank you for having
Yes,
the meeting, but I was also, thinking. Acres Mounds, Third Ward, let's be at least different, neighborhoods, pockets have different issues and concerns. So if you could address the Thornton Community Center or the cancer clusters or the different things in Sunnyside, where you already, let's just say the top 10 groups. So that particular person in Acre Songs will know about the cancer center, they will know about the problem. So at some particular time, everybody rallies around one particular issue and get one particular thing done.
That's right.
So that's what I was sort of.
That's why one of the big,
Introducing the concept or the premise of getting a representative or a issue solved in, like, if the people from Sunnyside knew about the empowerment, the Thornton Empowerment Center, everybody working on that with one particular thing. And to, you know what I mean, to get the numbers up, the numbers are what actually gets the actions, right? So you get the numbers up in on one particular thing, and then you could be able to go to the next thing. I'm not saying you're gonna circle back around and not having to readdress that, but I'm just saying, look at something that we could have, how many people in District 18?
870,000.
870,000. So if you had so many working on, you know what I mean, on one particular thing, or it can get, one thing can get addressed and done. You see what I'm saying?
Well, that's why one of the big things that we're doing on our campaign that is somewhat unique is that we do have team leads in, we've divided the district up. So we can make sure we have our ear to the ground on a lot of these things. Like, for example,
Good idea.
yeah, like for example, Miss Pro Block is somebody that we're working with a lot. Miss Trina Lowry, who also lives in Acres Home.
Mhm.
You know, Huey Fontenot, who grew up in Clinton Park Fidelity area.
Okay.
So all of that stuff is what we're using to really go forward and have community members that are buying into our campaign and are also, you know, able to go forward and tell us about what are some of the things that they're hearing that they want to see.
Some kind of vehicle, some kind of, I know what's going on this, from the 18th district.
Yeah.
Vanport. I know what's going on the Sunnyside, or I know what's going on in Independent Heights, or I know what's going on.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, as far as somewhere within the information sharing that we do, then all of, maybe you already have it, I don't know, but I'm just saying, whatever's going on that can be addressed and can be a completion, or can be, you know, there's a solution to this particular thing, because I do know what's going on in Third Ward. I think I'm gonna go down there and work with them for a while. I think I'll go over here and work with them for a while.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. There should be some success story that you could be able to say, I did this, we did this, or something to that end.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's good that you that you've already established that grassroots connection, because as Ms. Renetta and I were saying, it's not going to work if you don't have that.
That's right.
And the fact that you understand that and you're already implementing that's a big plus for you.
And the other thing to that is that it's not just about when, you know, during the campaign. A lot of times people will build campaigns and do things and that goes away when they get elected.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we're committed to do that when I get elected as well. So like make sure that the office is having people that can be assigned to specific areas of the district that keep their ears to the ground.
Yeah.
And they can go forward and pay attention to these things as well.
Yeah.
How do you get in touch with me?
If you give me your number, I'll make sure we stay in touch.
Are you in communication with this lady?
I would love to get her
That's what
information.
you're saying.
All right.
You should do it.
Yeah, Josh, you gotta be getting these numbers. Last two things, I'm assuming no more questions, you good? You're not, you good? Okay, last two things. I'm sure how long did you work for the Congresswoman?
4 years.
4 years. So in those 4 years, I'm sure you heard the good and the bad. First question is, of the critique that you heard about her, give us one critique that you heard about her that you're going to work on making sure that that's not a critique of you. That's the first question. And the second question is the one that you really want to answer. Why should somebody vote, support and vote for you?
I will say that a lot of the critiques around the congresswoman, I personally felt were not accurate. I
Okay.
can just say as me-
Just focus on the ones that you thought were accurate. Like maybe because she wasn't perfect. So whatever she could have done better, what was that thing that you will make sure won't be a critique of you, whatever that thing was?
I think that she could have done social media a little bit better,
Okay,
but I think that, you know, it really just has everything to do with, I think, her generation.
sure.
And, you know, it just wasn't really something that she was brought up really doing per
Right.
se, but I think she
Okay.
did a good job at social, better than a lot of the folks that we have right now, I will say that.
Okay.
So, you know, I think that Congresswoman, in my eyes, was the greatest representative we've ever had.
Okay.
And, I think that she should be respected as such, and I'll be doing those things kind of like going around the district. Like one of the other things that we didn't really get a chance to talk about today, I think is preserving our history. So I want to be making sure that, you know, we're continuing to educate people about the sacrifices Sylvester Turner did and Congresswoman Jackson Lee, like all of these people that have done so much for us. I want to make sure that we're going around and we're doing that as well. So
You're 27, right?
26. I'll be about to be 27.
26 now, as a right. So you're Gen Z, right?
That's right.
So are you the most qualified Gen Zer in the race?
We're supposed to say yes.
Yeah, as a softball pitcher, brother. I'm giving you softballs.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying. First, I was trying to think. First, I was trying to think about: is there even another Gen Z?
I don't know.
I don't know. That's what kind of caught me off guard. I was like, but yeah, no, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, lastly, watch it someone support and vote for you.
Because I believe that we don't have time for weak leadership. And I think that we need somebody that can be strong and is unapologetic about calling these Republicans out.
That's right.
We got a lot of folks in Congress that are scared. I mean, just call it spade a spade. They're scared. They're scared of Donald Trump. They're scared of the Republicans. And they feel as if, you know, they're sitting back with a bunch of super soakers while Trump sits back with a flamethrower. I mean, that's just the current state of the environment.
Yeah.
So we've got to make sure we have somebody that has fire and intensity that's not afraid of Republicans. But then also has experience at the federal level to understand how to get federal dollars here, how to make sure they can get bills passed, how they can make sure that we can get things done. That's the experience that I bring to the table and the experience that I look forward to bringing as next congressman.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that part because when we were talking earlier, you talked about your experience working on the federal level, and I want you to reiterate that because people need to know you don't have to guess what certain offices are. You already know.
That's right.
So if you can reiterate the answer you gave us earlier, as far as you know where certain things are, so you don't have to guess because you've already been in this federal space.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. I don't need a assistant from leadership's office to come and tell me, here's where Longworth is, here's where the appropriations room is,
Right.
here's how to contact Rosa DeLauro, here's where Rayburn office building is. I know where they are because I've been through all those places.
That's right.
And so because of that, it's not going to be a big learning curve of me having to go and spend years learning how to do things. I know how to get things done and start on day one.
Right. Cool. Okay, brother. Thank you for coming out for this canceled
That's right.
for the weather.
That's
So I'm gonna get with your what do you official campaign manager? What's your title?
No,
HNIC?
no, I do field. I do
Oh.
field.
Yeah.
You do field.
Yeah.
Field. So field organizer.
Yeah.
So I'll get with
He's our
Josh.
lead organizer.
Yeah,
That's right.
and he will. Yeah. So Mr. Isaiah Martin will be back. We have two available Thursdays in July. This is actually a rescheduling, but he's been here. You've been here since 8:40?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been talking for a good 2 hours. So he's
Yeah.
been killing it. So he actually already did it, but we're gonna redo it and get it officially. We want you guys to come out and support this young brother. He's running for Congress. I think he's qualified. I think we can help him be stronger if we do this together. So thank you for being here. We appreciate it, and we will see you guys next Thursday.
Absolutely. See you soon.
I think you can want this thing here.